The biggest news in politics today is the upcoming debate. Yes, in 1 hour, Tim Walz, a high school teacher, a high school principal, a football coach, a winning high school coach, football coach, I should say, is going to take the debate stage and debate novice 39-year-old two-year senator, not even 2 terms, 1 term, 2 year senator JD Vance of Ohio. Not likely to draw the massive number of viewers that tuned in to see Donald Trump get that licking from Kamala Harris, but yet lots of interest in this debate. Most folks don't pick the president based on who they select as vice presidents. And some say the role of a vice presidential candidate is to do no harm. Well, this year is unusual for so many reasons. We've heard it over and over again that this may be the most consequential election of all of our lifetimes. And so, given that, I think the vice president, and most pundits agree, the vice presidential debates have taken on new and increasing meaning. So, we thought it only appropriate to spend this entire hour with experts in debating, experts in political strategies, communications experts, folks who can help us understand how to watch the debates tonight, what questions we should be asking, what answers we should be listening for, and talk about this unusual format. CBS has announced that their moderators, the 2 women, the 2 journalists who are going to moderate this debate, will do zero fact checking, unlike Lindsay Davis and David Muir, who moderated Harris and Trump debate, who did push back on just a small fraction of the falsehoods told by Donald Trump on that debate stage. Well, CBS, capitulating to commands and demands by Donald Trump, have decided that their moderators are going to follow more of the CNN model of the debate between Trump and Joe Biden, where the moderators ask a question, get a response, even if it's a big fat lie. Say nothing other than thank you and move on. Interesting way to host a debate, particularly given how given how close, I should say, we are to the presidential election that's coming up in less than 40 days. So when we come forward, we're going to bring on 3 experts who are going to help us understand what we might learn from the debate tonight and what might the consequences be for the winner and the loser, because in every debate, there's someone who inevitably is going to walk away as the clear winner, and typically there is a clear loser. Will that be Tim Walz or JD Vance? We will find out shortly. Aaron Kall is with us. He's the Dean of Students at the University of Michigan. He's also the director of the debate program at the university. Also, Joel Rubin is here. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for House Affairs of the United States, and that's under Barack Obama. And a little later in the show, Richard Greene, a Democratic strategist, is going to join us. All right, Aaron, last time we were together, you were inside the spin room for the debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I am told you're not in the spin room tonight, but imagine that you were there. Help us understand what's likely to be happening right now as the VP candidate, Tim Walz, VP candidate, JD Vance, get ready to take that debate stage in Manhattan.
Yeah, there's I think a lot of anticipation about tonight's debate, given that it's probably going to be the last political debate of the cycle. And so both of the candidates are going to be preparing to make their closing arguments for the ticket tonight. And I think, there's a lot of anticipation and buzz. I think that both of the candidates have taken this very seriously. I think we're going to see a better debate tonight. Donald Trump doesn't like the formal debate prep and likes to be a little more freewheeling. And I think that showed in the last performance in Philadelphia. But JD Vance taken it very seriously. He's performed admirably in the 2022 Senate debate, 2 debates against Tim Ryan. I thought he did very well. He's kind of a veteran of the news Sunday shows and kind of talk circuit, even with some more adversarial networks and hosts. And so, Yale law degree and given his background, I think he'll do very well in both of them. I mean, they've got, Tom Emmer and Pete Buttigieg playing the stand-ins for this, trying to recreate, what the stage is going to be like. And so I think both campaigns, given how close the election is, realize the importance of this, especially if it's the closing argument for both campaigns. And so I think we'll see a very substantive back and forth debate, because I think both of the debaters, looking at their past performances, are very formidable debaters, and will be able to handle each other and take any kind of aggressive one-liners that kind of come their way. They're not going to get distracted, worry about focusing on the issues. I think they're very professional, and you'll see that play out later tonight.
So you just kind of articulated the reasons that you thought JD Vance would do well. He's a law school graduate. He went to a prestigious law school, Yale. He makes the rounds on Sundays to all the Sunday news shows. He's a frequent guest on Fox News. He's debated in high stakes campaigns when he ran for Senate for the state of Ohio. But what about Tim Walz? There's been some reporting that Tim Walz is not as comfortable. He's not been the regular on TV, cable news shows Sunday morning. He hasn't made his rounds, and he frequently avoids answering questions, impromptu questions from reporters when he's out on the campaign trail, and that he doesn't have the kind of debate, I would say, experience on the national stage that someone like JD Vance has. Do you think that puts Tim Walz at a disadvantage in any way?
I don't believe much of that. I think a lot of it's setting lower expectations for the debate. I had the opportunity to watch all of Walz's last performances, both in 2022, 2018, even going back to when he was 12 years in the House. So he's very experienced debater. I mean, he kind of said the same thing where he's, I've never used a teleprompter. I've never used. I just think you have to take all that with a grain of salt. I mean, he's a natural. Part of the reason he was picked is just how affable and how he can relate to people. He's got this really unique biography, and so he's a much more experienced debater than JD Vance, who I think just has had 2 debates at the Ohio Senate level, but JD Vance has had a half dozen debates at the gubernatorial level, then the congressional ones. So this is both of their first kind of experiences on the big stage like this. And Kamala Harris had something very similar. Her first presidential debate last time in Philadelphia, she did great. So no, I don't. If there's one thing that will hurt him, I do think he's kind of been in a bubble for the last several months since he was the nominee. JD Vance, they put out not just in the GOP friendly media ecosystem, but he does CNN and other places. Any interview he accepts. But Walz, she was in the joint interview with Kamala Harris at CNN, and we just haven't seen him very much, which is a little odd. I mean, part of the reason, labeling the Republicans weird and some of that things that went viral, they've kind of kept him under wraps. So because of that, because he hasn't done as many interviews, maybe has as many reps, that may make it a little more difficult, and that puts a little more pressure on him. But if he can deliver and do well, then that'd be very positive. And so Harris, I think, had some of the same issues, but that'd be the only thing I'd be a little concerned about.
What do you think, Joe? These 2 candidates couldn't be more different than night and day. We've reported earlier about Donald Trump painting this just doomsday vision of the world and of the U.S. If Kamala Harris wins, he talks about World War III. He talks about global nuclear catastrophe, farmers losing their farms, factories shut down, immigrants killing all of us, raping us, murdering us. I mean, like every horrible thing that you can imagine, Donald Trump says will happen if he loses. And presumably JD Vance is going to tonight deliver that same message about how horrible all of our lives will be if Donald Trump loses.
I know. Imagine how horrible our lives have been for the last 4 years, right, Areva? Because they were great under Donald Trump when he was president. I mean, that pandemic was glorious. The financial situation of the country where he stacked up $8 trillion in new debt was just a great way to invest in our children's future. His attempts to get rid of healthcare was really a prime example of his care for the American people. Look, sarcasm aside, I'll tell you, I call it the Chicken Little dynamic, but what I really meaning that everything is going to be wrong. And we all know that's a lie. Look, I feel like for JD Vance, the hardest thing he has to do tonight is that he really only has an audience of one. He's not trying to convince the American people that he's a good guy or a smart guy and he could be the president. He's not trying to convince the American people that Donald Trump is a truly effective, stable, calm, righteous leader. He's trying to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't dump him from the ticket. And he's trying to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't throw, I don't know, spaghetti at the wall, maybe this time as opposed to ketchup. And for JD Vance, being a serial liar, it makes it very hard to then go into a debate thinking, I have to keep on lying. And what did I say in the past? Because, when you lie a lot, you don't remember the truth, and then you can get caught. And he'll get caught, especially, I'm sure Tim Walz will point out how he was an anti-Trumper for most of his life. And then he's also going to have to think, what will Donald Trump want? And maybe he'll talk about eating pets and, other kinds of insane ideas to please the boss and make him look crazy. So I actually feel a little bit for JD Vance. If he was on his own, representing himself like he did in these Senate races, he can get away with some good debate skills, but he's not representing himself tonight. This is not JD Vance. This will be Donald Trump coming right through JD Vance's brain to our screens.
Well, Andrew, Joe raises a good point, and we know whenever you are on Donald Trump's team, you've got to perform for Donald Trump. So we know that is JD Vance's number one job, is to show the boss that he made the right selection in picking him. And that means repeating the lies that Donald Trump has been telling the American people for the last 4 years, and that he's even escalated, that whole doomsday scenario that he paints. And now we have this scenario, Andrew, where CBS says to its moderators, don't intervene, don't fact check. If he says that Kamala Harris wants to legalize fentanyl, your job, I'm sorry, Aaron, not Andrew, Aaron, your job is to just say, thank you, Mr. Vance, and to keep moving. How is that going to play out if we have moderators literally sitting there just saying thank you, even though you just told the biggest lie possible? I think you're on mute, Aaron. Can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
I'm not surprised to hear that there won't be the fact checking going on this time. There wasn't any in the CNN debate, and there was a predictable backlash. Just because they mostly fact checked Donald Trump, although he obviously said more incorrect things, there probably could have been an opportunity or two. They could have stepped in on the Harris side, but they didn't. And this goes back all the way to when Candy Crowley from CNN did the same thing in the Obama-Romney debate in 2012. So, it's a natural kind of response to that. But, I think the philosophy of the network and the moderators is that the candidates are the ultimate fact checkers. And going back to the first debate in June, it was something that just President Biden, for many reasons, he was under the weather that night, and maybe age and stamina, couldn't do that himself. But I have no reason to think that Kamala Harris or Tim Walz, they could fact check if they've spent the time preparing for the debate, which I know they have, and know the facts. Then they can interject and say, this is actually, what the situation is. And also the voters, may require a little more work, but they have the opportunity to go to some fact-checking sites like PolitiFact and others to see what exactly is the case.
Hold on a second, Aaron. Let me push back on that a little. If the moderators are only going to sit there and read questions, it just begs the question to me, what's the purpose? They can mail the questions in and just have them, stand there and recite their answers. And yes, your opponent can fact check, but the way these debates are set up, it doesn't give you a lot of time to do that. And you literally, with someone like Donald Trump and presumably JD Vance, could spend all of your time pushing back and correcting the record on the lies that they tell. They tell so many lies, and they tell them so quickly that sometimes it's even difficult to push back on them. And yes, people can Google and go to all these fact-checking sites, but what are the chances that someone other than folks like us that do this for a living are going to do that? The American people, the average person, is busy coming home from work. They've been doing homework with kids, getting dinner on the table. So I'm not sure that I agree that this is a good idea. I found that CNN debate to be incredibly frustrating for someone to make such a bold lie, like Donald Trump did, and then for the moderator to say, thank you, Mr. Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have to pick your spots. I think with ABC, the reason they interjected is because they thought it was so egregious that it would decrease the credibility of the network if they didn't step in with a totally outrageous lie or claim. And so I think that'd be the same case now. And candidates, if it's up to them to do the fact checking, they can't do it in all of them, but for a few key things can do so. Donald Trump is much quicker and says a lot more incorrect things probably than a JD Vance. So, Walz has a better opportunity. But I still think debates, even with or without the fact checking, it's a very unique skill set. Not knowing the questions in advance, subjecting yourself to an adversarial moderator, being outside your ecosystem, processing information in real time. There's still a lot of skills that it's important to, even if it doesn't include all the fact checking. And some of the networks do a pretty good job right after the debate ends. They go through some of the big exchanges and do some fact checking there in real time. And so hopefully the audience will at least stick around for a little bit afterwards to try to get that analysis as well, if it didn't happen during the debate contemporaneously.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Joe? I don't know. It just feels like to me to have a moderator after they've heard something as ridiculous as Haitians are eating pets to then just say thank you and move on to the next question. And again, like I said, the timing doesn't typically give the opponent, the leeway that's needed to fact check that person and talk about your policies. I mean, we got 90 minutes here, so you don't have an unlimited amount of time. And typically your rebuttal is a minute, maybe 2 minutes at best.
Yeah, Areva, it's a real disservice to the viewer. I just find it to be a deeply negative way to try to educate the public about the differences between the two candidates. We have arbiters, we have umpires, I should say, that's even a better term, who are able to and should be calling balls and strikes. That doesn't mean they should say, we like your policy more, Mr. Vance, than your policy, Mr. Walz. No, but they should say, hey, JD Vance, that's a lie. Kamala Harris is not going to turn us into a communist country. Like there should be some base level of fact checking truth, because the viewers are viewers. They are not encyclopedias. They are not going to spend the next 3 hours afterwards Googling and researching and trying to remember one of the 48 different lies that was there. And so my frustration with this format is it plays into the hands of the most psychopathic liars that you have on the stage. And that's what we saw with Donald Trump. What he did to Joe Biden, clearly it was a very bad debate for Joe Biden. But what Trump did was he so loaded the conversation with lies, misrepresentations, and aggressions that really were out of bounds that Biden just got overwhelmed and he didn't know how to deal with it. Do I try to fact check and then lose half my time where I can get my message about my future plans, And so I thought Kamala Harris, she was brilliant, of course, in that debate, but she also did have the benefit of having a third party there to call balls and strikes, to level set, to enable her to share a message and not spend most of the time down in the gutter with the person on the other side who was not telling the truth. And I think that's why you saw the Trump people so upset, because they don't want to be called out and they don't want to have to explain their points, and they don't want the truth positions to be out there, because that's not what they are communicating in their vision for the country.
Yeah, and I guess, Aaron, I'll give you the last word before we go to some news, but it just feels like Trump's team complained, as they always do, as they continue to berate the media, and then the media capitulates because Donald Trump, in all of his privilege, pushes the media around a great deal.
I think that usually to try to evaluate these debates, if you're complaining about the moderators, then that means that you didn't do a good job in the debate. And he came to the spin room afterwards, and that's another indication that he knew he didn't do very well. And even if there were no fact checks, I think Kamala Harris would still have done very well last time. It also would have eliminated the only real criticism Trump had of the debate. So, maybe if that were the case, that would have taken out his only, thing. And I don't think the media, it went into the general media, but yes, a lot of the right-wing media ecosystem was real complaining about the moderators, but I don't know that it's stepped into the mainstream media and more overall. So, but we'll see. I mean, every debate can be different. I think it's good to have different philosophies and perspectives. I wish there were more. Maybe we'll get another one or two, but it's okay to get some different rules and marketplace of ideas for people to get the most information they need to make a very important decision.
Well, thanks so much, Aaron. Always a pleasure to be in conversation with you. Appreciate your insights. Joel's going to stick around. We're going to do a little news, and when we come forward, more about tonight's big VP debates. Richard, welcome to the program, and thanks, Joel, for sticking around. Richard, what are you going to be looking for tonight? This is the only debate involving these two vice presidential candidates. Some folks say they don't matter because they're second on the ticket. They're not at the top of the ticket. What do you say to that?
Well, first I have to say you are doing an extraordinary job of booking guests. Joel Rubin is one of my favorites. Hey, Joel, how you doing, brother?
It's good to see you.
So
Thanks.
here's what I want. Here's what I want people to know, and you're never going to hear this anyplace else but on Areva Martin's show. And that is that when you watch JD Vance debating Tim Walz, you are looking at potentially the next president of the United States, not vice president. And you're shaking your head because you understand that under the crazy crazy rules of the Electoral College, if the election is tied and it goes into the Congress in what's called a contingent election, if the House can't figure out how to elect a president because they can't get to 26 states, then whoever is chosen in the Senate would be sworn in as president of the United States at noon on January 20th. So if you don't like JD Vance, the only way to make sure that he is not the commander in chief and the leader of the free world, you got to make sure you and everyone you know goes out and votes.
No, really great point, Richard. Joe, also when we watch these debates, I hope people are looking at the experience level. JD Vance has been in the U.S. Senate for 2 years only. This is his only position in our government. He's never held any other elected office. Tim Walz, on the other hand, has been a U.S. congressman, and he's been a governor of a state. So when you look at their resumes, you look at the experience of governing, there's no comparison. And Richard just explained one way that JD Vance could be president, but also Donald Trump is an older, elderly man. If we were worried about Joe Biden's age, that he was too old, we need to have the same concerns about Donald Trump's age. So everyone was like, oh my God, if Joe Biden becomes the president and he, croaks, Kamala Harris will be next in line. Same thing applies. Donald Trump is old. He's in poor health. He doesn't eat well. We know that he's stressed out. He's going to jail. So if something happens to him, there's JD Vance in the White House, a guy with 2 years experience. That's not talked about enough. I hope folks these moderators who can't fact check, I hope they ask really important questions about experience.
Look, Areva, you have me laughing. And first of all, I have to also give a hat tip to my dear friend Richard, who is one of the great gurus of messaging that I've ever met, and it's an honor to be with him on the show. Look, Donald Trump, just to the latter point, is 78. He looks horrible. I mean, he's obese, obviously. God knows what his cholesterol levels are. He can't walk a flight of stairs, I'm sure, without heavy breathing. You got to wonder about his longevity. And quite frankly, the American people should wonder about that too, because his health is a risk. He does not reveal his medical records. He does not reveal what his doctors say about him. He lies, as we all know, on his forms. I think we had learned a while back, a few years ago, that he was like 6'4", like 220 or something. I'm almost 220 if that's the case. I mean, look, I'm sorry. That guy is a health hazard in the human embodiment of a walking health hazard. Let's put it that way. And to your point about experience, JD Vance is definitely not a shining example of public service. This is a hedge fund guy, a venture capitalist, a bookseller who basically made a lot of money trashing his hometown. He got elected less than 2 years ago. Now he wants to be the vice president of the United States. And you compare that thinness of thin resumes to Tim Walz, who I'm sorry, but like public service matters if you want to be in the public sector and be a leader in the government. And Walz has done the work. Being a teacher, first and foremost, is an incredible experience set for leadership. It demonstrates one's capacity to engage, to communicate, to think, to listen, to dialogue. 20 years of that, coaching alongside that, then service in the House, service in the military concurrent to that, then service as governor. This man has done the work. He's prepared. I don't want my doctor to have basically not yet gotten out of medical school and operate on me. I would prefer to have somebody who has a little bit of experience before they, extract that tumor. And so I'm really proud of Tim Walz's preparation alongside, we got to say it, the VP, Kamala Harris, a highly prepared candidate, a woman who has served, a woman who has done the work, been a prosecutor, served in the Senate for a number of years, served as the vice president. Service matters. Experience matters. These people will have the most difficult jobs on the planet. I'll finish after this, I promise. But imagine what's going down today, right? Where we basically have the potential for a major war in the Middle East. Who do you want at the steering wheel? Do you want the guy who is going to start screaming and complaining, how's this happening? It never would happen, and start calling and flailing who? I don't even know what. The last time there was a crisis in the Middle East when he was in the White House and our troops got shot at, he actually didn't do anything. He actually had no response. He sent out a tweet. Or do you want a president like we have in Joe Biden and what we have in the VP, somebody who's going to communicate with our allies, lay out a clear vision, speak with our troops, giving them confidence that they have their back, and our allies as well. I mean, it's night and day. And so I think that we'll see it on display tonight. To the point, we'll see the 20-year gap, because JD Vance is a superficial politician, and it's going to show tonight.
When we come forward, Rich, I want to get your take on some of the comments that Joel said, particularly about the inexperience level, but also what would you advise Tim Walz to do, since the moderators won't be fact-checking? So when JD Vance starts the barrage of lies that we know he will tell, what advice would you give him? Does he spend his time fact-checking, or does he spend his time advancing the message that he and Vice President Harris have crafted that is resonating with millions and millions of voters across this country? All right, Richard, assume you've been hired by the Tim Walz team because they wanted the best communication strategists on the planet. And they get your number from Joe because he's your bro. He says, call Richard Greene. And so here you are now advising Tim Walz. You got to tell him, look, they're not going to fact check. Lindsay Davis will not be in that moderator seat. She's not going to remind American people that there's no such thing as execution of babies after they are born. That's not an abortion. That's illegal. That's called murder. So what do you do with your time? Because your time is limited.
So, first of all, I would tell Governor Walz, who I love, and you'll remember I predicted that he would be chosen and said that he was the best choice because he's such an incredible human being who can relate to everyone. He is a normal as opposed to a weird, right? So I would tell Tim Walz what I tell all my clients all over the world: just be yourself. Just be yourself. Don't worry about all the white papers and the facts and the this and that. Just first and foremost, be yourself and share that joy and love that just emanates so effortlessly from that guy. Number two, I would take a pencil. They're allowed to have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. And I would just mark down the lies. Each lie said, Senator Vance, that is your 15th lie. And then leave it at that. Right? Because we all know that he lies. And, it's up to the Democratic Party to message exactly what the truth is, not to use the debate time for that. But the third thing, and this is critical, and I'm a big fan of being pragmatic and being transactional in how we approach politics. We do not have to love our politicians, just like you don't have to love your Uber driver. They just need to get you to LAX safely and on time, right? And to go back to, listen, if you vote for JD Vance and his running mate, women will not have their reproductive rights. Immigrants will be deported. We will not be able to fight the climate change that is devastating North Carolina and the rest of the South. This is about what direction we want to go as a country, and not to get caught up in the back and forth on little lies. That can be a distraction, and we only have an hour and a half.
So, okay, I hear you, Richard. What do you think about that, Joe? Because when the candidates do what Richard just said, it sounds like they're just repeating talking points. That's how I felt listening to Donald Trump in the last two debates, the debate with Joe Biden, the debate with Kamala Harris. It's like a playbook, and he just repeats himself over and over again. Is that how you connect with the American people? If they just hear you say the same thing, Haitians eat pets, Haitians eat pets, and you say that over and over again, do people then believe that Haitians eat pets?
You know, I'll tell you honestly, Reeve, I really am hoping for the moment of just pure truthfulness as to who these gentlemen are. There's a bit of a moral hazard in these debates, which is that the talking points matter because oftentimes they're synchronized with the media strategy and the social media strategy and the paid advertising strategy. So you'll see the message communicated on a debate stage, and all candidates are guilty of this, but the message communicated and it's packaged into a commercial and then it's used as part of the advertising and the promotion. I think that's okay up to a point, but really we want real. And what I love about Tim Walz, going to Richard's good point, is that this guy's authenticity ratings are off the charts. He is so good at being real. And it's probably because he is real and because he was a teacher and he was a coach and he was in the armed forces and he did serve in the House, which is a forgive me for saying it, the shit show. I apologize for doing that, but I have to. I know it's not the technical. I worked with the House every day on behalf of President Obama's State Department as a senior official to the House. It's crazy land. Tim Walz was up there. He's not crazy. And so that needs to come through. And so I hope these extemporaneous moments, the look of VP Harris at Donald Trump when she looked at him, remember, and paused and say that former president, she said it better than I could, but that realness, that was what went viral, and that's what stuck in people's minds. And I think that we'll see that with Walz, because remember, JD Vance is a horrible, horrible, horrible communicator when he has to communicate from his own brain. He's
Let me ask you this.
Good at that.
No, great point, Joe. Richard, let me ask you this. Attacks. We know Donald Trump is notorious for attacking. And JD Vance has been on the Sunday shows. He's been on the cable shows attacking, being the attack dog that Donald Trump wants him to be. We know that, according to Republicans, Walz has told a couple of different versions about his military background. So we know that's probably going to be a line of attack. We know they have this narrative about what happened in Minnesota during some civil unrest. We know that's probably going to be a line of attack. This whole giving free lunches or milk to students, which most people would say hallelujah to, is going to be another line of attack by JD Vance. How does JD Vance respond to these attacks? Should he, hit back? Michelle Obama gave us permission. We don't have to go high anymore when they go low. Or does JD Vance, pivot to his key messaging points?
So I just wanted to follow up on something you said. It's not about talking points. Let me give you a quick story. On my Uber ride, actually it was a Lyft, from LAX a few days ago, I was talking to the 30-year-old single woman who was driving. And I said, "Are you going to vote?" She goes, "Yeah, I think I'm going to vote for Trump." And I said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, I had more money back then." Okay, I've heard that before. And I said, "Do you care about other issues? Do you care about women's reproductive rights?" And she said, "Of course." And I said, "Did you know that Kamala would sign the bill to restore women's reproductive rights across the country and Donald Trump won't?" And she looks at me and she goes, "No, I didn't know that." So I just think we have to come back to the basic differences, the contrast, not the talking points, but the actual overall general contrast. And with respect to the attacks that he gets, I trust that Tim Walz is going to be able to justify everything he's done. And when he's made a mistake, like any human being should, say, "You know what? I made a mistake." That's called being human. And people love that. The best words that, and I tell this to my political clients, that a politician could use is, "I don't know," or "I made a mistake." That's what we want from fellow human beings. And that's why, because they don't do it, we hate politicians.
Well, I hear you, Richard. And under normal circumstances, I would tend to agree with you. There used to be a time in our body politics where you could say things like, hey, I think I got that wrong. Hey, I need to check with my team about that. I'm sorry if I offended you. Donald Trump enters the scene, and that level of civility now gets twisted as somehow being weak, as somehow not being an effective communicator. So, Joe, I don't
Let
know
me let me
if
just add one thing quickly. One thing quickly. I would hit JD Vance over and over and over again about why he called Donald Trump America's Hitler. Let's put him on defense on a very critical thing that came out of JD Vance's own mouth.
Well, we know JD Vance has been very critical of Donald Trump. There are receipts, there are videotapes, there are audio tapes. So there are lots of really good information and content that Tim Walz can use. But I don't know, Joe, do you think Tim Walz can say, I made a mistake and get away with it? I'm not so certain that that's what Democrats, the new Democrats who've taken the gloves off, would want to hear him say.
I think he'll run right past the I made a mistake on some issues. He may barely touch on it, but he's not going to wallow in his self-pity at all on this stage, nor should he, quite frankly, because you know what? He has a great story to tell. And that's the key thing in this debate. At the end of the day, the American people want to see someone who they believe is going to be a good complement to the president, get some points across. And quite frankly, Walz is going to be a charismatic individual who gathers the attention of the people. We have to say this, he is not well known nationally. This is his first best chance to show that high level of quality that he has. So people walk away thinking, this is a solid ticket. This is something I can really support, as opposed to JD Vance, who's going to, I think, descend into very confused territory by the end of this debate, because I do believe, to Richard's point, Walz is going to point out all the foibles and really put him at odds with his only audience, Donald Trump.
Yeah, Richard, real quickly, to Joel's point about Tim Walz being relatively unknown, and he has not been as active on the campaign trail. JD Vance is everywhere. He's on all the shows. He's making campaign stops. I imagine Tim Walz is out campaigning, but they've kept his profile pretty low. So should he be using the debate to try to raise his profile? Tell us more of that backstory that we heard at the DNC.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. But here's the difference. The more you know about JD Vance, the less you like him. The more you know about Tim Walz, the more you like him. Again, as I said in the beginning, he just needs to tell his own story. He needs to be himself. And I guarantee that America will go, God, I really like that guy. You know why I know that? Because that's what happened with me. I didn't know him until relatively recently. And I saw him on a few television shows and I go, wow, I love this guy. America's going to have the same reaction.
Wow. Well, thanks to both of you. Your insights are invaluable. I'm glad that the two of you could reconnect. Reba Martin in real time. We have the ability to do that. We bring old friends.
I'll call you later, Joel.
Help folks make new friends. Well, that debate, in any moment now, we are all going to witness the first only debate of this cycle between the two vice presidential candidates. They are going to square off at the CBS headquarters in Manhattan. And this is going to be a showdown between two men with totally different visions for this country. JD Vance, in the vein of Donald Trump, has a vision that America is going to hell, that gangs are overtaking our cities, that Haitians are eating pets. Whereas Tim Walz is running alongside Kamala Harris, who has painted a vision for America that's based on hope, that's based on optimism, that says to the American people that working together, we've already accomplished so much. And if you give me and my team an opportunity to be in the White House come this November, we will continue to build on the great legacy that Joe Biden leaves us with. Tim Walz, not very well known to many Americans, but someone who was incredibly accomplished, military guy, U.S. congressman, high school teacher, high school principal, high school varsity football coach, and then governor of the state of Minnesota. You can't get a much better resume than someone like Tim Walz.